I am Sama, real name Tibe. I'm from Utrecht, I'm 27 years old. And I am a techno DJ and producer. Just had a release on WSNWG, Rodhead's label. I did a remix for Introversion on ARTS and a collab EP with a good friend of mine, Timo. My dad had a friend, or my parents had a friend, and he was a DJ. And so around that time he started to teach me DJing on vinyl. That was for like a year or 1.5 or something, and then it died down a little bit again. And then at one point I got a controller from my dad for my birthday or something when I was like 12. And I started playing music and DJing. And when I was 14, I had already had that controller for 2 years, but I just kind of found out I really wanted to make music as well, like really produce my own things. But I was way too addicted to just like gaming and stuff in general. When I would come home from school or from playing with friends, I would also always just go straight behind the PlayStation, and I realized something I'm still kind of proud of the 14-year-old me is that I realized that if I would be doing that, I would never make it as an artist. So I sold my PlayStation and I bought Logic, and I started producing first EDM, and then after around 2 years, when I was 16, I fell in love with techno. Mostly through my parents listening to that, but the love for it really started when I went to a party for the first time, and I was just overwhelmed by the feeling it gave me. So first I started producing EDM. I was still pretty interested in the trancey sound of that initial love for electronic music that I got through Chesto. So very melodic, very just big and epic and ethereal kind of music. And I still have that love for this kind of music, to be honest, just not in the same, I guess you could say, cheesy way as I used to love back then. But I think you can still also hear that in my productions. There's just a big inspiration drawn from dramatic moments, I guess, just really like bigger than life feelings, I guess. So in the techno I used to produce, that I released on labels like Drumcode and Kraftek and Noir Music, I used a lot of really big synths and really big breakdowns, big drops, while still trying to keep a techno feel to it, like a groove and something you could dance to. And in the last few years, I've kind of really done a lot of work to trim that down to techno, like really focus more on the groove and the texture and the atmospherics instead of really big synths and whatever. But I still have a lot of big synths and big sounds in there, big just sound designy stuff, and I am starting to think I probably will never be able to shake that. I will never really be able to just make tooly kind of techno. It just doesn't do it for me.
Hi guys, this is Tibe, also known as Sama, and if you want to know how I produced this track here, then I recommend you to check out my masterclass on Sign. We start with the drums, we do a lot of drum processing, bass processing, resampling and really getting to this nice little rumble bass. We will take you through the process of putting a lot of texture on top, a lot of atmospherics, and once we have that, I'm going to show you how I do some of my warping and sound designing stuff. There's going to be a really big part of arranging to really make your track flow and try to tell a story throughout the track. And yeah, trust me, there's quite a bit of information in there, so I hope you enjoy.
I actually just work in the box. There's a very rare occasion here and there where I record something beforehand, or I sometimes do record like vocals or just little random Foley sounds in the studio with my mic or with my handheld mic if I'm just out and about or I hear something interesting. But most of the stuff just really happens in the box. That's just my way of working. I just really became the best at working with samples and like really fucking those up, and really, yeah, just sound designing with samples and with effects that are already in the box and stuff. We are in a lovely little area that is quite close to my parents' house, and we moved here when I was 18. And from when I was 18 until halfway my 20th, I lived here, or like close to here, and this is a part where I used to walk around quite a bit. I play in clubs with CDJs. I am not good enough playing with vinyl, and I am also not really a digger in that sense for vinyl and stuff. I play with 4 CDJs and really like use them all. I really don't like playing with 2 CDJs, or I mean 3 is possible, but it's also still a little bit too few in my opinion. Because I really like to layer stuff. I really like to, yeah, I guess that's like the maximalist in me. It's like I love layering like techno because it's so minimalistic and because it has only a few elements, and really layer those elements to create something new and more intense than it already was. And by layering, it's also really nice to really keep the drive in there, like really, because you have multiple tracks playing at the same time, and you can keep them playing at the same time. You can loop little sections where there's little heads and stuff. That's just that's kind of the way I play. Most of the time, very dark and heavy. But I do really like to lighten it up a little bit here and there, with I don't know, still like some, I guess, like trancey melodies or atmospheric things, vocals here and there, and sometimes a little breakbeat. And it also always depends, of course, on if it's in a club or on a festival or at an illegal rave or a house party or something, because I think you always have to adapt a little bit. I don't really like just always playing the same thing. I always really like to adapt to my environment, to the people that are there at the party, and also the DJs that are playing before and after me. I don't also, I do some work beforehand in finding music, of course, and creating like a bigger playlist of like almost like 50 to 100 tracks or something, to get like a general idea of what I want to play. But I never really put it in a certain order. Some of my favorite artists are, if I look at techno DJs and producers, I would say for DJing it will definitely be Rodhead and Renee Weiss. Those are people I really look up to, and who also play quite a similar style to me, even though I do like to go a little bit darker. But honestly, there's so many cool names out and about at the moment. For producing, I would say someone like Norbach is probably my biggest inspiration. But also guys like Oscar Malero, and there's a producer called Lidval. Really cool stuff also from him. Yeah, Psych, Orbe, Orbi, whatever you call it, Orbe. Yeah, guys like that. And I would say that artist-wise, so anything like outside of techno, I am also very inspired by artists like Niels Frahm and other more, I don't know, contemporary, experimental, electronica producers. Yeah, one of my favorite moments was actually in the Corona period still. The clubs would open in the UK, but not yet in Holland. Like in Holland it was almost a year later, so it was, I think it was July 2021. And I had a gig at Motion in Bristol, and for that I had to stay inside at a friend's house in Manchester for a week, quarantined, because I first needed to test and make sure that I didn't have COVID. But then I got to play at Motion, which is a sick club. It was like, I think it's like 1,400 capacity or something. And to be honest, I kind of really like bigger clubs, because of just like the big epic vibe to it or something. But it was the first night that people could party again, so I could start off the night. I opened for Alan Fitzpatrick, and I got to play for 4 hours, which is a beautiful long time slot for me. Something I really like to do as well. So I really got to do my own thing, and the room filled up within like half an hour, and it was just instantly, it was just off. And it was also the first time that I could really like show people what I had been doing in the Corona period. So like, you know, working on my sound and really changing it towards a more like pure techno sound, which just it was a magic moment. It really was something that I have not felt before and not afterwards. Just everything coming together, and everybody being happy, and me as well, of course, because I could finally play again. And that was beautiful. I think I have a very unorthodox way of producing techno, at least, because I have so much eye to detail. So most of my tracks take quite a long time to produce. And if you check out my masterclass, you will also notice that. I think there's a lot of experimenting and trying out different things before I get to something that I'm happy with. And also I think I really actually especially like the arranging process, because by then I've already made a loop that I'm happy with, that I can, you know, keep on listening to for some time. And then once I start arranging it, I really make it come to life. I think that's just a lovely thing to be able to do, to really, you know, play around with automation on like loads of things and add some effects here and there to make it a little bit more playful. So I mean, if you want to see how I approach things in producing, and how I get to the sound design choices I make, but also how I do my drums, and also how I do my arrangement. So really to make it flow and try to tell a story with every track. I would recommend you to check out my masterclass at Sign. See you there.